Hey everyone, you guys really wanted us to do a deep dive on Sauron, and well, you got it.
Yeah. It seems like there's endless fascination with this Dark Lord.
And we've got the perfect source material for it. The darkness behind the ring.
Oh, yeah. This book goes deep, really digs into his character.
Yeah, and it turns out he's a lot more complex than just, the fiery eye and the big bad guy thing.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot more to Sauron than meets the eye.
For example, did you know that he started out as like a being of order and craftsmanship?
That's right. Originally, he was known as Meren, and he was a Maya.
A Maya.
Yeah. In Tolkien's world, Mer are kind of like powerful spirits that serve the Valar. Think of them like angels, but, Tolkien style.
Okay, so like a powerful spirit dedicated to creating things.
Exactly. And he served Ollie the Smith, who is like the god of craftsmanship.
Wow, so Ollie, he created like all the mountains and valleys and stuff, right?
Exactly. He shaped the very foundations of Middle-earth.
So we're talking about someone who was literally connected to creation, like a master builder.
Yes, and that's what makes Sauron's fall so tragic. This incredible skill set twisted into something dark.
Yeah, so how does this master craftsman become the ultimate evil we see in The Lord of the Rings? I mean, that's a pretty big leap.
It is, and the book really highlights that tragedy. Meren was seduced by Morgoth.
Morgoth, the first Dark Lord.
Right, and Morgoth's lust for power corrupted Meren, twisting his desire for order into this tyrannical ambition.
So it's like his greatest strength, his ability to create and shape, becomes his ultimate weakness.
Yeah, it's a classic story of good gone bad. That potential for order warped into a need for control.
And speaking of control, the book talks about how the One Ring wasn't just a weapon for Sauron,
Oh no, it was way more than that. It was an extension of himself.
like literally a part of him.
Yes, imbued with his will and his essence. The book calls it totalizing power.
Totalizing power, huh?
It's like this all-consuming desire to control everything and everyone. Every aspect of existence must be bent to his will.
Wow, that's pretty intense. So losing the ring wasn't just about losing power, it was about losing himself.
Exactly. His very being was tied to that ring.
That's a whole other level of my precious, isn't it?
Definitely. It adds a whole new layer of complexity to the story.
Speaking of layers, let's talk about that iconic Eye of Sauron. The book actually goes pretty deep into the symbolism behind it.
Oh, the eye is fascinating. It goes beyond just being a scary image.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that.
One Tolkien scholar, Tom Shippey, argues that it represents the loss of humanity and soul.
So it's not just about seeing everything, it's about a reduction to pure surveillance and control.
Exactly. Kind of like how we worry about Big Brother watching us today.
Yeah, a little creepy how relevant that feels right now.
It's a timeless fear, and Tolkien tapped right into it.
Though I gotta say, the eye in the movies is very different from how I imagined it in the books.
Oh, yeah, they definitely took some creative liberties. In the books, the eye is more of an abstract terror, this unseen presence lurking in the shadows.
It's like a psychological torment.
Right. Well, in the movies, it's very literal. A giant burning eye searching for the ring.
Both are scary, but in totally different ways.
One preys on your mind, the other is just pure visual intimidation.
Yeah, both definitely nightmare fuel. But this source makes a good point about how Sauron isn't just some random evil dude.
No, he's a product of Tolkien's world.
Yeah, and he reflects some of the real-world fears that Tolkien was living with at the time.
Exactly. Remember Tolkien was writing during World War II? A time when totalitarian regimes were on the rise?
Oh yeah, like Hitler and Stalin.
Right. And their tactics, fear, propaganda manipulation,
Yeah.
it's all there in Sauron.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty chilling when you think about it like that.
The ring wraiths spreading fear, the ring's promises of power, it all connects.
It's like Sauron is this dark reflection of the political landscape of Tolkien's time.
Exactly. And the book also points out another fear that Sauron embodies something that's still relevant today.
Oh, what's that?
The destruction of the environment.
Oh yeah, Mordor.
Exactly. Mordor is depicted as this desolate wasteland stripped of all its natural beauty. A stark contrast to the vibrant landscapes we see in other parts of Middle-earth.
Like the Shire.
Right. It's almost as if Tolkien was using Sauron to critique the dangers of unchecked industrialization and environmental damage.
Yeah, it's a powerful image, and sadly one that's still all too relevant.
Hmm.
But, we've talked about how Sauron impacts the world.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does he actually affect the other characters? Like, not just as an antagonist, but as a force that shapes their lives.
That's where things get really interesting. Sauron isn't just an antagonist, he's a force that shapes the very choices and actions of everyone around him. including the heroes.
So he's like this unseen puppet master, pulling the strings, forcing others to confront their deepest fears and make tough choices.
Exactly. Think about Frodo. He's carrying the ring, which is basically a part of Sauron himself.
Oh man, yeah.
It's constantly tempting him, whispering doubts and fears in his mind. Talk about psychological warfare.
No wonder Frodo is struggling all the time. He's fighting Sauron on two fronts. The external battle to destroy the ring, and the internal battle to resist its corrupting influence.
Precisely. And it's not just Frodo. Gandalf, Aragorn, even Gimli and Legolas, they're all forced to dig deep and confront their own weaknesses because of the threat that Sauron poses.
It's like he's this catalyst for their growth, pushing them to their limits and forcing them to become more than they thought they could be.
Right, and it makes you see him in a whole new light, not just as a villain, but as this driving force behind the entire story, shaping the heroes' journeys in ways they don't even realize.
Wow, that's so true. But something just occurred to me. If Sauron is this powerful, this all-knowing being,
Yeah.
how come he couldn't see the good in others? Like, why couldn't he understand the resilience and the compassion that ultimately defeated him?
Well, that's a really good question, and it gets to the heart of what makes Sauron so fascinating.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The book points out how baffled Sauron was by Frodo and Sam's resistance to the ring. He simply couldn't grasp why anyone would willingly reject such power.
Wow, it's like he's totally blind to the concept of selfless sacrifice.
It's as if the very idea of goodness is completely alien to him.
That's both amazing and terrifying. Like he's trapped in this echo chamber of his own making, unable to see beyond his own lust for power.
It is a bit tragic, isn't it, to be so powerful yet so limited in understanding?
Yeah, it really makes you think. This deep dive is already changing how I see Sauron. He's not just evil for evil's sake. He's a fascinating study in psychology, power dynamics, and the consequences of unchecked ambition.
And we're just scratching the surface. There's still so much more to uncover about Sauron.
Well, I can't wait to learn more. Let's keep diving in.
Welcome back. Last time we really dug into Sauron's backstory and, all the complexities of his character.
Yeah, it's amazing how much depth there is to him.
It really is. But, we talked a lot about how his presence affects Middle-earth as a whole.
Right, like this overarching shadow looming over everything.
But I think it's also fascinating to look at how he impacts the other characters on a more personal level.
Especially his own followers. Like, what was it actually like to be on Team Sauron?
Well, let me tell you, it wasn't exactly a fun time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Being Sauron's minion doesn't sound like a dream job.
Not really. Sauron wasn't exactly known for, team-building exercises and morale boosters.
He wasn't winning any Best Boss awards.
Definitely not. He ruled through fear and intimidation. Think about the Nazgul, his most powerful servants.
Oh yeah, the ring wraiths.
Right.
Yeah.
They were essentially slaves to his will, completely bound by the power of the rings he gave them.
So even though he had this massive army at his command, there was still this sense of isolation.
Exactly. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? He craved control over everything, yet he pushed everyone away.
Yeah, it's like his own ambition was his downfall, cutting him off from any real connection.
Precisely. And his relationship with Morgoth, well, that wasn't exactly built on trust and loyalty either.
So it was more about a shared lust for power than any real bond.
Oh, yeah. They were playing a very dangerous game. And in the end, it consumed them both.
It makes you wonder how he compares to other, classic villains. Where does Sauron fit in the grand scheme of bad guys?
That's an interesting question. You have your classic villains like Darth Vader or Voldemort.
Yeah, driven by revenge or a thirst for personal power.
Right. But Sauron's ambition was on a whole other level. He wasn't just after conquering a kingdom or ruling a country. He wanted to dominate all of existence.
Whoa, that's pretty intense.
He wanted to reshape the very fabric of reality according to his own twisted vision. Total control.
So he wasn't just playing the game, he was trying to change the rules of the game entirely.
Exactly, and that's what makes him so terrifying. He represents a kind of evil that's rooted in perversion of order and efficiency.
So it's not just about chaos and destruction.
No, he wanted to create a perfectly ordered world, but one that was completely under his control.
Like a perfectly run machine.
But with no room for free will or compassion, just cold, hard efficiency.
It's kind of like the worst aspects of bureaucracy and surveillance taken to their absolute extreme.
You got it. And some scholars believe Tolkien was drawing on some of those real-world anxieties, especially with the rise of totalitarian regimes and the growing power of technology.
It's like Sauron embodies all those fears wrapped up in one character.
Absolutely. He's a warning about unchecked power, the allure of control, and the dehumanizing effects of surveillance.
And let's not forget the whole environmental destruction thing.
Oh, right. Mordor, that desolate wasteland.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder about the consequences of prioritizing industry and technology over the natural world.
Tolkien was really ahead of his time in that sense.
It's amazing how he managed to weave so many complex themes into a single character.
It is. But, going back to the heroes for a minute,
Yeah,
we talked about how Sauron impacts them and how he acts as this catalyst for their journeys.
right. Like Frodo's constant struggle against the ring's influence.
Exactly. It's important to remember that Frodo isn't just carrying the ring. He's carrying a piece of Sauron himself. It's this constant psychological battle.
Yeah, it's like Sauron is always there in the back of his mind, whispering doubts and temptations.
Precisely. And it adds this whole other layer of tension to the quest. Frodo isn't just facing physical dangers, he's facing a constant internal struggle against Sauron's will.
And it's not just Frodo. Gandalf and Aragorn, too. They're always having to make tough choices, confront their weaknesses, because of the threat Sauron poses.
It's like he forces them to dig deep and find a strength they didn't even know they had. He pushes them to their limits.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? That this embodiment of evil actually helps the heroes become stronger.
It is. But it also shows how his influence can be incredibly seductive. Think about Saruman and Boromir.
Oh, yeah. They both started out on the side of good, but they were corrupted by the ring's power.
Right. That's the insidious thing about the kind of power Sauron represents. It's tempting, it promises easy solutions, and even the best intentions can get twisted.
So it's like a cautionary tale about the dangers of power and how easily it can corrupt even the purest hearts.
Exactly. And there's something particularly insidious about the way Sauron uses temptation.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, he doesn't just offer raw power. He offers order, efficiency, the promise of a world free from chaos and uncertainty.
So he's appealing to people's desire for security and stability.
Right. It's a very subtle form of manipulation, one that can be hard to resist.
It's like he's offering a solution to a problem that he himself created.
He is. He's the ultimate snake oil salesman, peddling a cure that's actually poison.
That's a great way to put it. And it makes him such a compelling villain.
He represents not just the darkness within ourselves, but also the ways that darkness can be disguised as something appealing.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've gone way beyond just, Sauron being the bad guy.
I know, right?
He's so much more than that.
Yeah.
There's this whole psychological and philosophical dimension to him that I never really considered before.
And you know what? We're not done yet. There are even more layers to Sauron that we haven't even touched on.
Really? Like what?
Well, there are all these different interpretations of him, both in scholarly circles and among the fans.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, let's get into that. All right, so we're back and ready to dive into all those different interpretations of Sauron.
Buckle up because there's a lot to unpack.
It's amazing how one character can spark so much debate and discussion.
It really speaks to Tolkien's genius as a writer. He created a character that transcends, simple good versus evil.
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious difference. How Sauron is portrayed in the books versus the movies.
Right. Well, in the books, Sauron is more of a psychological presence, like this looming threat, this shadow hanging over Middle-earth.
Yeah, we rarely actually see him directly.
Exactly. And that makes him even scarier. It allows readers to imagine their own version of his terror.
It's like the saying, fear of the unknown. Our minds can conjure up something way more terrifying than anything, a movie could show us.
Exactly. But in Peter Jackson's films, Sauron is given this, more tangible form.
Yeah, we see the fiery eye, and in the flashback scenes, he's this massive armor-clad figure.
Right. It definitely makes him a more immediate threat, but it also removes some of that psychological depth and mystery.
So there's a trade-off. The movies prioritize spectacle, which, makes sense in a visual medium.
Right.
But I could see how the books, by keeping Sauron more in the shadows, tap into a deeper, more primal kind of fear.
Now, beyond the differences between the books and movies, there are also some really interesting interpretations within, scholarly circles and among the fans.
Oh yeah, fill me in.
Well, some Tolkien experts argue that Sauron is the ultimate embodiment of totalitarianism and surveillance.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
They point to his obsession with control, his use of propaganda and fear, and, of course, the symbolism of the all-seeing eye.
It's like Big Brother on steroids.
Pretty much. And this interpretation makes a lot of sense considering the historical context.
Oh yeah, for sure. Tolkien was writing during a time when totalitarian regimes were on the rise.
Exactly. It's like he was using Sauron as a warning about the dangers of unchecked power and, the erosion of individual freedom.
A cautionary tale for the ages.
Right. And then you have scholars who draw parallels between Sauron and the biblical figure of Lucifer.
Oh, wow, the fallen angel.
Yeah. They see Sauron's initial role as a Maya of order and his subsequent corruption by Morgoth as a reflection of Lucifer's fall from grace. The classic story of ambition and pride leading to downfall.
So we've got Sauron as a totalitarian dictator and Sauron as a fallen angel. Two very different but equally compelling interpretations.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. But what about the fans? How do they interpret Sauron?
Well, fans often focus on that seductive allure of forbidden power.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like he represents that temptation we all feel sometimes, to take shortcuts, to seize power for what we believe is good, even if it means compromising our values.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Like the ends justify the means kind of thing.
Exactly. And there's this certain fascination with his tragic fall from grace. He was once this being of light and order, but he chose the wrong path.
Yeah, it's the ultimate cautionary tale. He shows us how easily even the best intentions can be corrupted by the pursuit of power.
Right. And then there are those who almost sympathize with Sauron.
Really?
Yeah, they see him as this tragic figure who was corrupted by a greater evil. They focus on his initial desire for order and creation, arguing that he was ultimately misled by Morgoth.
So it's like they see him as a victim of circumstance.
In a way, yes. They believe that his good intentions were twisted and that he ultimately became a tool of Morgoth's evil.
It's amazing how one character can inspire such diverse and even conflicting interpretations.
It really is. But that's the beauty of Tolkien's work. He creates characters that are so complex and multi-layered that they can be interpreted in so many different ways.
So what does it all mean? What's the takeaway from all of this?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that Sauron is more than just a villain. He's a symbol. He embodies all of our fears about power control and the choices we make in the face of temptation.
He's a mirror reflecting our own anxieties and fascinations.
Exactly. And by studying him, by exploring his complexities, we can learn a lot about ourselves and the world around us.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. We've gone so far beyond the surface level and uncovered so many layers to this character.
It's been a journey for sure.
And I think the most important thing we've learned is that Sauron is not just evil for evil's sake. He's a complex figure with his own motivations, his own desires, and his own tragic flaws.
And remember how we talked about his inability to comprehend goodness?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a reminder for us to never underestimate the power of good in our own lives.
Even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there's always hope, always the potential for good to prevail.
That's the message I think Tolkien wanted to convey.
It's a powerful message for sure. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Sauron. And remember, keep exploring Tolkien's work because there's always something new to discover.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.